Hello, I am Surgeon General, and in this video I will be overviewing Lucky Spell Suppression in Path of Exile and when you should use it. Recently, while preparing a League Start build guide, I was interested in determining the points at which taking the Lucky Spell Suppression Mastery passive was most efficient and when passive points should instead be dedicated towards simply increasing suppression chance. Since suppression is a generic mechanic that can be used on many builds, I felt that the analysis warranted its own mechanics video so that others can decide whether to incorporate Lucky Suppression into their own builds. To put the bottom line up front, Lucky Spell Suppression is the only way currently in the game to multiplicatively increase your chance to suppress. However, due to the math behind the Lucky mechanic in Path of Exile, Lucky Spell Suppression will be most efficient on low-level characters or in early league situations where you have some access to suppression from the skill tree, but reaching the 100% cap requires an unreasonable investment. In this video, I will go over spell suppression basics and its sources, then cover the mechanics of Lucky Suppression. I will go into the math for how lucky rolls add additional effective suppression chance to your character and discuss the situations in which you would likely want to invest passive points into acquiring lucky suppression. Spell suppression in Path of Exile is a defensive layer that, on success, provides damage reduction against spell hits. This damage reduction applies on top of other defensive mechanics, such as elemental resistances. Unlike resistances, the damage reduction also affects physical damage taken. However, suppression only applies to spell damage and will not help reduce damage from attack skills, such as enemies' basic attacks. The final point to keep in mind is that suppression only affects hits. Damage over time, such as burning ground and shaper degeneration pools, are unmitigated by suppression. The chance for suppression to succeed has a maximum cap of 100%, and at base level provides 50% reduction from spell hits. The amount of reduction can be scaled by modifiers reading prevent plus X% of suppressed spell damage. However, sources of this stat are relatively rare. All characters have 0 base chance to suppress spells. This can be increased with added modifiers, such as those available on armor pieces, both implicit and explicit modifiers, flasks, and passive tree skills. Note that all of these sources provide flat increases to the suppression chance. There are no direct ways to multiplicatively scale suppression chance currently in the game. However, the lucky suppression mechanic, which is the topic of this video, provides a multiplicative factor to your effective suppression chance. There is only one source of lucky spell suppression in the game. It is found only by allocating the spell suppression mastery on the passive tree. Like other luck mechanics in Path of Exile, Lucky Spell Suppression works by rolling every chance to suppress twice. If either of these rolls succeeds, you receive reduced spell damage. Under the effects of Lucky Spell Suppression, you can calculate your effective chance to suppress by calculating the chance to fail 2 consecutive suppression rolls. Rearranging the equation leads us to a quadratic relationship between the base chance to suppress, the one shown on your character sheet, and the actual effective chance to suppress when lucky. This relationship is best understood by plotting the effective suppression chance against the base suppression, as shown here. In this chart, the blue line shows the effective chance to suppress spell damage when your suppression chance is lucky. Comparing this to the base suppression chance without the lucky roll, shown by the red dashed line, you can see that you are always better off under the effects of lucky suppression and that you can receive pretty substantial suppression chance from the lucky mechanic alone. To further illustrate this, I've prepared this chart of added effective suppression chance plotted against the character's base suppression chance. This is basically a graph of the difference between the two lines shown on the previous chart. This graph shows the amount of additional suppression chance given just by the lucky mechanic alone, and it tells us that the lucky mechanic is most effective at base suppression chances near 50%. Near the end points of the chart, the lucky mechanic is less effective. At the low end, because your base chance is too small to reliably hit on either roll, and at the high end, your base chance is already so large that you often don't need a second roll to suppress damage. As a point of reference, I want to point out just how strong the 25% additional suppression chance near the center of the chart actually is. Compare this 25% to the amount of suppression available on passive tree notables, like Inveterate, Quickstep, and Instinct. Most of the notables provide 8 to 15% spell suppression chance, whereas Lucky Suppression provides much more under certain conditions. This comparison shows us that for characters with base suppression chances between 20 and 80%, taking Lucky Spell Suppression at the cost of 1 passive point is an extremely effective use of skill points. I will close with some additional considerations for determining when you should consider investing in Lucky Spell Suppression. The first is what league you play in. Hardcore characters will almost certainly want to cap their suppression chance at 100% because even a small chance to miss suppressing damage can send their characters to standard. For softcore characters, you can aim for 30 to 50% suppression, then use the lucky mechanic to gain an additional strong defensive layer at very little investment. For the few cases where your suppression layer fails, leading to a one-shot death, no big deal, just take another portal. Lucky Suppression is also very useful for characters who don't have the resources to reach the 100% chance cap. This could apply to hardcore characters who are still leveling, or to new league starts where gear with high enough suppression rolls to reach the cap is still very expensive. Finally, remember that all of the suppression passive tree nodes are on the right side of the tree. It will be impractical for classes starting in the center or left of the tree to do enough pathing to pick up a meaningful amount of suppression on the tree itself. Lucky Suppression will allow these characters to pick up only the closest wheel, and then scale up that small suppression amount with the Lucky mechanic. Don't forget though that the Lucky mechanic is only available through the Spell Suppression Mastery, so it requires pathing to one of the notables shown here. I hope this video has given you some ideas for how to optimize spell suppression investment in your own builds. If you have enjoyed the video or are interested in more content of this type or in-depth build guides, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support.